Dr. Karen Becker is a proactive wellness vet. With Dr. Mercola, she runs the website mercolahealthpets.com, and her goal is to help us create wellness in order to prevent illness in the lives of our pets. This is a proactive approach seeking to save pets and owners from unnecessary suffering by identifying and removing health obstacles even before disease occurs. Of course, most vets in North America are trained to be reactive rather than proactive, waiting for symptoms to occur before treatment. She is with us at the All About Pet Show to help make lifestyle choices to improve our pets' quality of life. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Karen Becker.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out. I appreciate you all being here. So, how many of you were here yesterday just by chance? Anyone? Because it's the same presentation. Okay. Oh, okay, that's good. Because sometimes people come, thank you. So, yesterday we had a really great turnout, I think partly because I'm not sure people had any concept about feeding whole, fresh, living foods, but I think as they were walking by, they're like, what is she saying? And it kind of draws you in. How many of you have thought, or how many of you are currently feeding any type of unprocessed or living foods to your pets? Good. How many of you have never heard about feeding anything raw or unprocessed to your pets? Is this brand new to anyone? Okay, great. So it's cool that you're here and open-minded. So what I've done today is put together a presentation. I speak very quickly, hopefully not too fast, but I'm going to cram about an hour and a half of information into 45 minutes. We're going to save about 15 minutes for questions at the end. But what I want to do is to give you a basis for feeling confident that you can feed whole, living, unadulterated, fresh, uncooked, unprocessed foods to your dogs and cats and do it really confidently. I want to give you those tools because it can be a little scary. This is not something that your veterinarian is probably going to be suggesting to you. It's not something that you are going to there are a few booths here that will reach you with open arms and perpetuate your education, but all along, it's really not something that we're talking about in veterinary medicine. In fact, I have been accused of kind of new age or new wave feeding, which is kind of funny to me. I'm going to go over about 15 slides as to why not only is this not new, this is feeding pets an evolutionary diet, which is what they were designed to eat from the beginning of time as domesticated carnivores. So I'm going to go over a little bit of the premise of why you can confidently feed raw foods to dogs and cats, how their bodies are capable of digesting and processing these foods, and then some of the risks and fears associated with feeding raw foods. Because if you're confidently feeding raw foods, you can go to a party or the mall or any type of get-together, and when people say, hey, what do you feed your dog? If you say raw food, people are like, oh my gosh. And then there's this list of questions. Don't they get worms? What about bacteria? What about bone? We're going to go over some of those questions that can help you either confidently put your mind at rest or be able to clarify some of the misconceptions that are currently out there about raw food. So my lovely assistant's going to, thank you. I don't have a clicker. No, you're fine. Sarah's going to click for me. She is a veteran. She did it yesterday. Okay, so what we know is every animal, regardless if it's a worm to an elephant, their GI tracts are designed to efficiently process the foods that they were designed to eat. So in the case of a worm's GI tract can efficiently process dirt. They were designed to consume dirt, and their entire physiology is designed to be able to process dirt to derive nutrients that that particular body needs. In the case of a ruminant or a vegetarian animal, vegetarians are capable of eating dried grasses and actually fermenting it through the super long GI tract to derive ATP and energy to actually grow up to 1,200 pounds from eating dried grass. It's pretty cool. That would not happen to us. We would starve to death. It wouldn't happen for the worm. He'd starve to death. But it's a perfect fit for this vegetarian animal because their GI tract was designed to process that. With carnivores, domesticated dogs and cats are biologic, true carnivores, and then scavenging carnivores for the dog. They are efficiently designed to shred, chew, tear flesh. Their whole GI tract, from their teeth through their very acidic stomach acid, very, very low pH, capable of handling bacteria, viruses, a very short GI tract meant to get food in and get it out. They don't ferment food like the cow where just their GI tract goes on and on and on and on. Very short GI tract for the carnivore, 8 feet, they get it in and get it out, and they've been able to thrive and process raw whole meat for millions of years. You are going to see throughout my presentation, I have a lot of photos. I have a little obsession with photos of cats catching mice. And the reason I have a multitude of photos of cats catching mice is I had a client who has a barn cat, two clients. I have a barn cat client and I have a downtown Chicago client. Both of my clients, their kitties caught mice and were in the process of eating them, and they both freaked out and they called. Most recently, the downtown Chicago client said, I am freaking out here. My cat caught a mouse. I'm freaking out. What do I do? She goes, I think I'm going to call poison control. I'm like, don't call poison control. She goes, I really want to call poison control. I'm like, don't call poison control. Your cat's going to be fine. He's designed to eat mice. This is freaking me out. I'm going to call poison control. She called poison control. $45 to talk to poison control. What did poison control suggest? That she induce vomiting, that you purge up the mouse because there could be risks there. This is, at least in America, guys, this is how far we are removed from the common sense factor. Barn cats have been hunting mice for millions of years, and you do not need to call poison control or induce vomiting if a cat eats its biologic diet. I don't necessarily recommend feeding mice to cats because where parasites are in the GI tract. So inside of a mouse, the mouse's small intestine could host coccidia, tapeworms, whipworms, and we don't want to pass those up the food chain. Raw foods, all of the raw foods that I'm talking about today are GI tract free, and all of the raw foods represented here at this show today do not include any GI tract, which means there's no parasite potential. So this will just remind you that you don't need to gas. It's totally normal that we catch mice. Worst case scenarios, they could get worms, so we don't feed the GI tracts, but you don't need to call poison control. So, how wolves became dogs is pretty interesting. We do know that the term Canis lupus familiaris, which is the domestic dog, in 1993 the International Society of Zoologic Nomenclature ditched the familiaris. It used to be Canis lupus, and Canis lupus is gray wolf. Canis lupus familiaris is the domestic dog. They ditched the familiaris because they know that about 99.9% of that DNA is identical. If we stripped off the coat of a dog and a wolf and had the best comparative biologists look at the guts, not the best scientists in the world could say this is the dog and this is the wolf. They're just identical. So they have lumped them together to be Canis lupus. We do know that all Canis lupus come from the family Canidae in the order Carnivora. Carnivora obviously meaning designed to consume meat. I'm going over these basics with you because in America we do have veterinarians and now a lot of people suggesting that dogs are omnivores or potentially could be fed a vegetarian-based diet. And I didn't design this system, but I'm highlighting it for you because I want you to feel confident in feeding your pets a species-appropriate diet. And we have now people arguing about what species-appropriate actually is. So to put your mind at rest, we do know that dogs were domesticated from gray wolves about 15,000 years ago. We know that they diverged probably in East Asia and that they were very successful. They spread around the globe and reached the North American continent by about 8,000 BC, and of course they've been here ever since. Domesticated dogs were, when they were wolves turning into dogs, most scientists agree, myself included, that they had a symbiotic relationship, that wolves kind of started hanging out like garbage dumps. They started hanging out next to farmers where they could catch rabbits, but the farmers were also starting to throw them scraps, so they ended up becoming domesticated and feeling more confident being around people. Because of that, dogs have had some unique adaptations pertaining to GI ability to digest a whole variety of different foods. And those of you that have cats and dogs already know that. You know that kitties have incredibly high, very specific, really good standards about food. They want it fresh. You try and feed kitties even canned food that you cracked yesterday, they want a fresh can, right? You try and get kitties to do anything nasty, like eat their poo, they're out. Dogs eat their poo, lick their butt, eat nasty bloated things in the yard. They just dig up crap and eat it. Dogs are a whole different category of gross compared to cats. And part of that is that they have evolved to be able to handle this unbelievable bacterial load through scavenging. So they have a little bit different adaptation gastrointestinally to be able to handle that. And so what that very last point was is despite the fact that dogs can eat some carbohydrates, dogs can eat some grains, no problem. Just like you and I could eat some dirt, totally fine, no big deal. When you start eating 30 or 40% dirt for our physiology, we're going to have GI problems. Some of us will have diarrhea, some of us will have cramping, some of us will puke, some of us will just get rashes and not feel good, but we're going to have a consequence of not eating our biologically appropriate diet. Same with dogs. We can feed them some corn, wheat, and rice, it's fine. The problem is they're going to have symptoms because it's not biologically appropriate in their diet. They don't need grains to be healthy. So when you flip over a bag of dog or cat food and you see corn, wheat, rice, potato, it's fine. It's just unnecessary. So my question is to doctors, why are we doing it? We're adding those things to pet foods because they're cheap fillers. It's a great way to just bulk up the food. But there is no question about why animals are exhibiting all the symptoms that they're exhibiting, everything from cancer to autoimmune disease to endocrine disease to organ failure, because we're adding a bunch of things into their food that they don't biologically need. and we're asking them to thrive without the raw resources they need to actually have a physiologic health response. And so there's no question in terms of disease and the answer when it comes to what we're feeding our pets. So dogs can process some carbs, they just do not have a biological requirement for grain. Kitties, interesting. Kitty evolution a lot more argumentative. I just stay out of the gig. All I'll tell you is this. All cats come from the same family of cats, and so it's interesting. Domestic house cats, lions, tigers, cougars, they all share one common ancestor. We will leave it to those people in that field to argue about exactly what tree branched off when, but what I will tell you is that in 2008, they believe that all descendants of the common house cat came probably from self-domesticating African wildcats in Egypt about 8,000 years ago. So, when I talk about genotype, that's the DNA. That's what's inside of a pet. That's when you remove the jackets, the skin of dogs and wolves can't tell the difference. That's the DNA. What man has done is bred fluffy dogs, blue-eyed dogs, short-legged dogs, wrinkly dogs. And why do we breed those? Because they're cool. I mean, we all have different tastes. That's why all of us have a breed or we're into certain things. It's cool. But that phenotype, which is what animals look like, man has kind of dinked around with to created certain looks, and that's awesome, but we have not changed the genotype. We haven't changed the dog's DNA. So even though over the last 300 years we've been dinking around with breeding certain cool traits because we like them, we have not dinked around long enough to change their DNA. So over here we have vegetarian teeth. So in comparative anatomy, if you have ever taken a course, what you're going to learn is you can tell a lot by what an animal was supposed to eat by looking at their dentition, their teeth. So vegetarian animals, they have huge incisors. Those front teeth are called incisors, and they're really big. And they're really big because they need them to grasp grasses. The grass goes to their molars, big round molars back here that are used to grind. So you see cows and horses chew, 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 still chewing, still chewing, still chewing. Then they erp it back up, and then they chew it some more. Let's compare this with carnivorous teeth. Sharp, notice, how many of you have kitties? Look at your kitty's incisors, you have to like stare. They're microscopic. They're physiologically not needed. So they're tiny. They don't have to grasp grasses. They have to spear prey. So they have unbelievably long, big canines. These are cat skulls, this is a dog skull. Still really huge canines. Those canines are used to grasp prey. They have sharp interlocking premolars and molars that are used to tear flesh, and that term wolf it down is very appropriate. You don't see your dogs chewing, 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 chewing. You see your dogs grab and swallow, grab and swallow, grab and swallow, because that's what they were designed to do. Dogs' jaws only work this way, like a trap door. They don't have lateral swing, so there is none of this going on. So you want to know, are humans capable of being omnivores? Yes. Anything that moves this way that can't chew and grind with sharp interlocking canines and razor sharp molars, you have to be thinking about the fact that they are predators. So, one more example. We have lateral swing, giant front teeth compared to very small incisors and very large canines. One more shot that will help you identify, two more shots. Over here, just to make the point that we have no questions about whether dogs are carnivores or not, we have vegetarian, this one cracks me up. Vegetarian, all these animals designed to process grains and grasses because their teeth allow that to happen. Over here we have carnivores, sharp teeth designed to catch and kill, hold and shred prey, raw meat. So the ancestral lifestyle of a carnivore is, historically speaking, lots of variety. Dogs and cats 200 years ago, when they were hunting on their own, barn cats would occasionally come in, and those kind of mangy dogs 300 or 400 years ago around the farms, on terribly cold nights we would allow them into the front room, right? Or we put them in the barn to keep them safe. And then maybe 250 years ago we brought them in the barn, and then maybe the front room. And then maybe 200 years ago we brought them in the front room, and then maybe when it was raining we brought them in the kitchen. And then 150 years ago, oh, it's cold, we'll just put them in the bedroom, they have to sleep on the floor, right? And then 100 years ago, well, when my husband's not home, they can come to bed, right? And then we finally convinced all of humanity. How many of you sleep with your dogs? Right. So, what I'll tell, and those of you don't, probably because of behavior reasons, and well, that's not this lecture, but all that to say, we have gone from dogs being outside to dogs being a part of our family. And we don't do a lot of seasonal variety. How many of you switch your dog's foods depending on what seasonal availability they have? We don't do that. But they did 200 or 300 years ago. Dogs and cats had a ton of variety. They ate their food fresh, whole, and living. It was not sterile. Raw food, so the biologic food for dogs is a rabbit. AAFCO, the Association of American Feed Control Officials, we have a set of basic nutritional requirements, and for dogs we founded that off of a bunny, and for kitties we founded it off of a mouse. Mice and bunnies, about 70% water, about 70% protein, really, all in all. So what dogs and cats need to be biologically appropriate? High moisture, high protein, no to low carbohydrate. That's an evolutionarily appropriate diet for dogs and cats. Needless to say, wolves, they didn't have their bunnies handed to them. And look at all of the wild felids. When you look at those kitties, they are lean and lanky and fast. You watch a jaguar run in slow motion, you just have to stop and be like, oh my gosh, stunning. They are wired as fierce, very effective predators, and they do their jobs very well. But in doing that, they burn calories, they tone their muscles, they got toe exercise, they got clean teeth because they had to bite through skulls and fur and spinal cords. They were able to exert themselves, which didn't allow them to become bored. So now we have kitties that we brought into our house, and to be quite honest, we held them captive, and I'm not arguing that. Who wants a kitty that is consumed by a wild coyote? We hold them captive in our house, and how many kitties spend their entire life? Their really amazing adaptive day is walk into the food bowl, right? Have a few snacks, back to the couch, right? No calorie burn. 2 hours, time for brunch. Back to the bowl, and back to the couch. And what do we have? We have bored, fat, lazy, kind of depressed felines is what we have. That was not the case 200, 300 years ago. So this is my client, Abby Roop. Abby Roop is the #2 dock diving dog in the country. I asked Whitney, her mama, if I could use this picture, please. Whitney loves her babies immensely. She flies all over the country dock diving, and she flew out to have these very fancy pictures taken by that fancy LA photographer who does underwater camera. So this is Abby, and when Whitney forwarded me these pictures, I'm like, I want to use them, because I'm still getting arguments that dogs aren't carnivores. So I just want to show you this. Just take a look at this, and take a look at this, and contrast it to this next picture, because I think they're very similar. Don't you see a lot of similarities? Sharp interlocking, okay, maybe not exactly the same, but the truth of the matter is, sharks also eat buoys and plastic and tires. You look inside of a shark belly, it's like, are you kidding me? Yeah, they're predators, but they eat a bunch of crap, like dogs, so I'm seeing a lot of similarities. So what I call my premise of nourishing pets in a positive way is species-appropriate food. And some people say, you know, you're really anti-grains. I'm so not anti-grains. Just feed grains to animals that were designed to consume grains. So if I was giving the goat lecture today, which I am not, if I was the goat woman, I'd be so all over grains, and you'd be saying, oh, thank God, Dr. Becker's not bashing grains. But I'm not giving the goat lecture, I'm giving the dog and cat lecture. So I'm also not knocking grass. Cool. Just feed grass to species that were designed to eat grass, like bunnies, okay? I am a vegetarian, and this is very confusing to people. Sometimes people also say, oh my goodness, I'm so thankful Dr. Becker's a vegetarian veterinarian, she's going to support me feeding a vegan diet to my dogs and cats, and I let so many vegans down. Vegans that are trying to convert their pets to veganism should have bunnies as pets. Okay, this is what you do. You don't get a pet and then try and morph it into a whole different diet. You buy a pet that lines up with your philosophical viewpoint. So if you are anti-meat, get a vegetarian animal. And this is just like common sense to me. Don't get a dog and then kill it by feeding it a vegan diet. Here's the kicker with dogs and cats. They're really resilient. They're strong. You take a delicate animal like a hummingbird whose evolutionary biologic diet is nectar, and you say, you know, I just don't believe in nectar. I'm a farmer, I want you to eat steak. The bird just up and dies. It just dies. And then there you go. Dang. I guess I didn't feed it the right food, right? Dang. Dogs and cats are the most nutritionally abused animals on the planet. And you know why? Because they don't die. They just get generationally sick. They just die younger, of more degenerative diseases, of more cancer. Even though we know the most in veterinary medicine that we ever have before, and we're really good at diagnostics, and we do CTs and MRIs and biopsies and amazing blood work, and what happens? We have a whole generation of dogs dying really, really young, even though we know a whole lot more about veterinary medicine, because we don't kill them off so plainly with nutrition. We kill them off slowly, allowing their bodies to not have the adaptive processes necessary to be able to thrive on the diets that we're currently feeding them. That's really the issue. So it's important to note that pet food in general is a really brand new concept. If we stood at the front door this morning and asked people, what do you feed your dog? Hello, dog food. What do you feed your cats? Cat food. That concept of people food and dog food and hamster food and cat food, all in the last 100 years. So animals have hunted prey for millions of years. Dogs and cats are designed to hunt prey. They still can do it. It's gross and nasty, but they still can do it. Their GI tracts are designed for this. The first dog food concept, a bag of dog food, crunchy brown kibble, and a can of dog food, about 100 years old. Dr. Mark Morris, who created Hill Science Diet, was the dude. And he did exactly what Betty Crocker did. Who wants to bake a flipping cake from scratch? God bless Betty Crocker, right? Just dump that and get it done. Dr. Hill's like, people do not want to throw scraps to their dogs. So I'm just going to put a bunch of crap together. I almost brought Mark Morris's book. He's got a great book about his life. He took rendered grain and rendered meat and put it together and processed it, and dogs ate it. And it made a generation of people go, oh, I can just buy dog food. I don't have to throw out scraps. They're not getting the garbage. I can just feed them dog food. And not only was he off and running, he's millions and millions and millions of dollars in that company now. So the good news is the body is adaptable and resilient. But as I just mentioned, that's also the curse for our dog and cat population, because we can feed them foods that are not biologically appropriate. It just creates disease over a long period of time. So it's important to be able to link what we're feeding our pets and disease that comes about, like, have a direct correlation. So what we know to be true about the pet food industry is that those amazing packages, those ads with the glossy Irish setter running, the Coke sparkling, we've done a really good job convincing you that the food that your parents fed their dogs and your parents' parents fed their dogs, and the food that you buy at your veterinarian that you pay an arm and a leg for, it is good stuff. Why? Because I am a doctor. So you need to trust me with your food choices. We've also done a pretty good job of not talking about the icky part of the pet food industry. We don't want to talk about rendered. How many of you know what rendered is? Not approved for human consumption? Okay, I'm a licensed meat inspector from Iowa. When the cow comes on the slaughter plant line and there's an abscess in its thigh, that quarter is rendered, which means it goes into a pile not approved for human consumption. Who buys that rendered meat? Pet food companies. And we take that rendered meat and we blend it with grain that also fails inspection. We add a synthetic lab-produced, mass-produced vitamin mineral supplement to meet basic biologic requirements. We extrude it or cook it, force it through a diet, very high temperatures, which creates a little crunchy ball that we call kibble. And that, my friends, is pet food. And then we ask an animal to eat it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner its whole life, and try and convince you that your dogs and cats are going to thrive by doing this. But I will tell you, it's a very highly profitable industry. So, some myths I want to cover with you, because this is what I found. People buy these myths that they would never buy if their MD told them to. So if your doctor said to you, if your pediatrician said to you, don't feed babies anything except baby food, because if you feed any type of homemade food, it could hurt them, and you don't know what you're doing, so don't feed homemade food. You have to buy commercially available Gerber food to be able to nourish your kid right. Or what if your pediatrician said, never switch your baby's food? Because if you switch your baby's food, it could cause GI upset, and your baby could have diarrhea. So just feed your baby one food his entire life. You would never go for that, but yet, as veterinarians, we've convinced you to never switch your pet's food. Likewise, what happened to the common sense that really a lot of people, when I tell them, when you feed a dry, crunchy kibble, it is not the same thing as feeding fresh whole meat. And people say, no, but there's meat in the kibble. There's a disconnect, and people assume that this is this, and it's simply not true. How many of you have heard this myth? All they need is pet food to be healthy. I have a lot of clients that come to my practice, and they actually will say, you'll be so proud of me, I only feed pet food. I would never feed human food to my dogs. And I'm like, dang, why?